Let me welcome the members to another sitting of the PAAC. Members, yes, sorry about that. Members, it is good to see the turnout at this sitting of the PAAC. At our last sitting, and I'm sure you would have heard my comments and disappointment that we were not able to have a sitting of the PAAC. I hope that it will not occur again, that we invite members or MDAs to the Parliament to appear in front of the PAAC or any committee at all, and unable to even have a mere quorum to start the deliberations. We had to reschedule the JUTC. I think they're scheduled to come next week, or week after next Wednesday. We have the Ministry of Finance to look at the central government budget and the medium-term macroeconomic outlook. Members, I know that we got apologies from some members, but again, I will urge members, especially when emails are sent out, we tend not to get any response from the email. If we knew beforehand that all members couldn't make it to the PAAC, then we would have then asked the JUTC and the Ministry of Transport to reschedule. There are some members who had sent in apologies. There are some that was unavoidably absent, which is understandable. But those who indicated the day before when we had the sitting that they would have come to the meeting did not turn up. It doesn't do well for us as a committee. So I'm asking members just beforehand, because the clerk generally sends out the notice repeatedly before the sitting, that members at least indicate beforehand so that we can have a better understanding of who will come from who will not. All right, so I hope we do have a productive meeting. Yes, Member Hollins, you'll get a chance.
Chairman, I know you know I'd respond. Last sitting, I would have ended up on the radio with you coming in from Italy, where I had to travel. And when I called members, they had either indicated they couldn't be there or indicated that they had problems in their constituencies, and felt a sense that you knew with adequate time. I wanted us to be able to even touch base by Zoom. And so I'm going to use this opportunity because I want to eliminate any possibility of an individual saying they can't come. I think even the day before is hard, because if you submit apologies the day before, the agency, the person invited, they're already geared up and prepared to be here. So from our standpoint, we have to do better than to apologize the day before, or the morning of the meeting, submit the apology at that time. What I would want us to be is in a position, if something comes up the day before, you come in via Zoom and make your contribution via Zoom. So I would like us to have it definitively noted here that we can continue to have what I would say quasi face-to-face Zoom combined meetings, so that we eliminate excuses from individuals who may have even had emergencies turning up either the day before or the morning of the meeting. I would also ask, going forward, where we have adequate notice that Parliament will not be in session at all, we attempt to not schedule meetings, or as soon as we pick up that no Parliament will be in session, it may be considered by some to be a bit unfair. I know some members will say, no, but that's our job and we're always supposed to be here. but we know what we go through as members of Parliament. So on the few occasions that Parliament is not in session at all, I think, Chairman, those are times which we should have no meetings. So it allows persons the latitude to go and work in their constituencies or do whatever else they have to do. And we hold them accountable to being here all the other times. As a member of the government side, I can tell you we have spoken as a team, and we are going to endeavor to ensure that we have adequate representation, that persons are fully prepared, and that we have full input at our meetings going forward.
Thank you. Let me just say, though, Member Holness, when that meeting was scheduled, members who were present and the meeting was circulated on numerous occasions. No one indicated at that point in time about, no, you indicated that you are going to be absent for a few. No, he did. So, but when you send out a schedule, and just remember, I can't unilaterally set a date and members agree. Well, the few that will agree, and that is why I'm saying to members, when you get the email, if you have an opinion, then state it then, right? But don't wait until we agree on having the meeting, on the few that agree to have it, and then we end up now looking like fools as we did 2 weeks ago, right? So, and the issue with the hybrid meeting, this meeting is one such. We sent it out, that it will be a hybrid meeting. But part of the challenge that I have is just the participation of individuals when they're on the hybrid also. So they're logged on, but look, Madam Holness, Member Holness, I am telling you from where I sit. No, but I am telling you from where I sit as chairman of this committee that the participation of those that are online are generally minimal compared to those who sit here, right? So you will get a chance to explain, Member Holness. You will get a chance to explain, but I have to say what it is that my assessment of what I am seeing. So, you can have a difference of opinion, but that is what I am seeing. Right? All right.
Chairman, that is being disrespectful by the member to tell you about hurry up. Because no, with all due respect, as a point of order, I sat here and I listened to the member, made her full presentation as she saw it. Every single member of this committee have similar privilege. None don't have any more than the other.
Thank you, Member Jackson. All right. So, members, going forward, once the standing order allows us to have it hybrid, we will have it hybrid. If you see the value of being online, but I'm just saying that this committee itself benefits more from when the members are here, being able to interact with those who we ask to come and appear in front of the committee. But all I'm asking is that members respond to the emails when they are sent, right? And at least indicate their interest in having meetings. Many a times we have to delay because of the lack of response from members when emails are sent out. Yes, lack of response. All right? Member Holness, Member Jackson, then yourself. Go ahead.
My apologies, Chairman, in respect of saying hurry up with that point, because I feel like we have gone over this, both of us having been on a radio program where we discussed this very same point. I am in total disagreement with you about the participation of members when they're on Zoom. And you made another comment on radio which needs to be clarified, a behavior a statement to suggest that government members are not prepared and that's why they are not participating. And I would like for the record to correct both of those statements, and I'm not raising an opinion. I want to correct the statement.
Member Hollins, I never singled out government members. I said there are some members that are not prepared when they come to the committee meetings, and that is a fact. And I'm not withdrawing that.
He was speaking of government members, even though he did not say specifically government members.
You cannot tell me who I was speaking of.
May I finish, Chairman?
On a point of order, Mr. Chairman. On a point of order, Mr. Chairman. You see, this is where, and I sat here and I'm listening on both sides. The member Jackson just spoke to the fact of order and protocol, and Member Holness would have apologized. But, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, you also have to show the respect to the members so that you don't, Mr. Chairman, please, it's the same thing I'm about to speak
I'm not stopping you. I'm listening to you.
We have to show each other respect. It doesn't come from one end, it comes from both ends. And so, Mr. Chairman, we who know better must do better. And I would humbly ask that for us not to sound as if we are hitting at each other, that we give each other time to speak. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Member. Continue,
Chairman,
Member
I am
Holness.
sorry if I sound frustrated. You have an element of frustration. I have one too, because it's my second radio program to defend what is not so. And we don't come to the meetings to try and resolve or have a closed-door session to put a particular appreciation in place for all of us in terms of how we function. What happens is immediately the media is where we go to have the discourse. So let me make it very clear. This is not an opinion. This is fact. Number one, you have opposition members who do not attend the committee meetings at all. Just the same way we have one government member who does not attend, who was a former minister. And we are going to deal with it from our side because we believe these meetings are important. Number two, you cannot cast aspersions as to the readiness or preparedness of individuals. It is speculation. You do not know what discussions we have had. You do not know if we say, okay, you are very strong on education, we would like you to lead. You are the person assigned to do the research. So the fact that the chairman is not aware, you cannot make those statements. It belittles the members who are fully prepared. And they may not feel like they want to speak. You cannot argue that they are unprepared for discussion because they do not speak. That, I believe, is a statement you should never make again. As it relates to persons online, Chairman, sometimes the persons are holding up their hands. Yes, those of us who are present face-to-face, we keep that robust discussion going on and very often forget a member online. Sometimes by the time we call the member who has their hand up online, the argument has been totally shifted, or we have ventilated that issue. And so the individual says, okay, move on. So I do not want us to leave in the public's mind a sense of unpreparedness, a sense of lack of participation, because I felt, having gone out of my way to call member siblings, I told you I was 7 hours ahead, called member siblings and said, look, I want to come on Zoom because I want to participate. I wasn't able to. No provisions were made. And so I think this is an important element. As I said, you have our commitment, Chairman. We have actually had our own discussions, and whatever is happening, we will ensure that we find a way to communicate and communicate on time if we're going to have an issue with a particular meeting. And I especially ask that when the session is totally closed, that we look back at those.
Okay. Member Jackson and then Member Siblings.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, it's ironic we're having this discussion. Member Holness and myself shared a radio program a couple of days ago. And one of the points that we were at one on is the value of these oversight committees as against the regular sit-ins. Number one, why the standing order requires make provision for non-executive members to be on it and not executive members, because members of the executive, ministers, whether it's Minister of State or full cabinet minister, they have collective responsibility to cabinet decisions and cabinet policy positions. Non-members of the executive are not so bound. So we all sit here, not as government members and opposition members, but as members of the parliament elected. I don't sit here as an opposition representative. I sit here as a member of parliament serving on this committee in respect of the country. And one of the points that Member Olness and I shared in that radar program is that the committee allows us to look at the issues in a non-partisan way. And that's why I made the point about not being government member or opposition member. We look at the issues from the perspective of what is best for Jamaica. And executive members don't have that privilege. Even they might share a different position because they are bound to collective responsibility. We have that privilege as members who are not part of the executive of government. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make another closing point. I am one personally. I believe that we should stick to the in-person meetings of the committee. We have been having virtual meetings because of the circumstance that imposed on us. We are a relatively small group, which is the committees of the parliament. After all, the parliament have never sought to meet virtually during the pandemic. We have sought to meet in person and to make the provisions to facilitate us meeting in person. So in my mind, if the parliament on both sides can see it worthy and justifiable not to meet virtually, but to meet in person, I can't see why the committees of this House should then revert to virtual meetings when we can meet physically. That is my perspective. I think it's the best interest of the committee's work, and I think it's the best interest of the country. So I just want to put that down. Of course, the decision will be a collective one. The Parliament did pass the motion allowing for committees to choose to. It never instruct for committees to meet virtually. We have that option, but I believe we should choose the options that can be most effective and fulfill our duty as members of Parliament.
Go ahead, Member, sir.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to make a contribution to the discussion. Well, as for me, I think the hybrid having the opportunity to participate in the discourse if you are not within the jurisdiction or not near the House is a good thing. And this is where the world is going. As a people, we can't be going backwards. We must be prepared, notwithstanding the advantages that we have experienced in the past with regards to face-to-face. I am sure we as a committee can look at what are the disadvantages in having the hybrid format and resolve those issues. Chair, you mentioned with regards to documents being emailed and persons needed to respond and to make comments. Chair, if you look back at some of the earlier minutes, you would have seen that this committee had agreed that discourse as it relates to reports and documents ought to be discussed here when there's a meeting. Yes, Chair, and I heard you.
Following you, so don't urge me. I'm not following what you're saying. That we agreed on what? Repeat
we agreed that the discourse, with regards to reports and documents circulated via email, should be discussed here, and not for us to make comments via email. We did.
No,
You're not talking about the reports?
No, we're not.
With regards to attendance, Chair.
It's regards to schedules, it's regards to attendance, all of those things, especially schedules.
Chair, with regards to schedules.
So I've never, sorry, let me just clear up. So we have never really
not report
asked,
you're talking. Okay, let me move on then, Chair, to scheduling and the timetable. It is a practice that at the sitting of the House, that schedules are circulated, and members sign whether or not they can attend or cannot attend. Right? Which I have always indicated whether or not I can attend. I just want to make that clear.
Let me just interject a little bit. Sometimes when we end a meeting, sometimes we have not yet agreed on who next, which ministry, department, or agency next. And instead of waiting until because not all the time, right? So instead of us, what will end up having to happen is that we would have to then call a meeting to then set that schedule. What we have done on a couple of occasions is make suggestions, a list of suggestions on which ministry, department, or agency, and ask members to agree. And we send out a date and ask members to agree. What we end up happening is that most members just don't respond, right? Then we move on with those who have responded. So, yeah, but I'm just saying, member wholeness. I understand that we agree that we will set that schedule here, yes. But then what will end up happening is that we would have to call a special meeting with no ministry, department, or agency coming to a hearing. Then we just have a meeting just to set that schedule. So we have done about 2 or 3 of them online, meaning that we have asked members. Members have responded. Members have turned up at the meetings. All I'm asking is for more participation from members when those emails are sent out. That's all I'm asking for.
Chairman, from Member Sibley's standpoint, what he's saying, we came to an agreement, and I understand your point saying we just come to do a schedule. However, the same comment you made, if over an extended period you're not getting a lot of responses to emails, the best place to sit down and have the deliberation on who we would want to speak to, why we would want to invite that ministry, agency, or department is in this setting. Because I remember even another comment that was made to say that 3 members voted to discontinue the virtual face-to-face meeting, and I was surprised. I don't think that a few members who notice a message should be the ones making the decision and the schedule. So we have to do better.
Members.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
There are members who are waiting in the meeting lobby to be.
Let me just make a point. It is the duty of the consultant to set a schedule. This schedule has been sent out on numerous occasions. No, we said so, but we just don't have enough members to even discuss it. So when it is even sent out, Jesus, member man. We have asked members to just give their suggestions, so when we come here, we can have a fruitful conversation. Don't behave as if members are not participating when these emails are sent out. And what it has done is made the task of the clerk much more harder. And when a few members alone turn up here, it is unfair to say member wholeness. because we did not vote that we are getting rid of hybrid, of the hybrid. We said the next meeting would be a face-to-face. That's what we said. Right? But if it's only 3 members that are here, then it is up to the 3 members to decide, because the rest are not participating, and we do have a quorum.
Exactly that.
Good.
Why didn't you have, at the same time I wanted to join, I wasn't allowed to join that?
No. That was a meeting before. Hold on, member, hold on. That was the meeting before, where only 3 members turned up to that meeting. The meeting before, the abandoned meeting, only 3 members turned up to that meeting. We barely had a quorum. Yes. Right? So the meeting before, so the meeting you wanted to come on, that meeting had to be abandoned because we didn't have a quorum. Yes, that was supposed to be face to face. Right? The meeting before that, which was 2 weeks before that, we barely had a quorum. We only had 2 members and myself. So that is why the frustration was there. But it's only 3 members to make a quorum, member of the wholeness. No. Well, no,
on a point
member,
of,
member
on a
wholeness,
point of
whatever
order.
it is that makes you excited. No, that is thing. Yes, but only if you have a quorum, that can make the decisions for the committee. All right? Thank you, members. No, but I said
on a
in
point
my
of order, Chairman.
Member Jackson, I said moving on, members, at the beginning of my opening comments, that once the standing order allows for a hybrid meeting, we will permit a hybrid meeting, right? And yes, so we will. That's how we will proceed. For those who find the value of coming face to face, and who find the value of being online, that's it. All right.
Chairman, will you allow my point of order to
go ahead,
move
member.
forward,
Go ahead.
I just want to urge us to accede to Member Clark's urging that we invite the invited guests to come in, given that we don't want to detain them, and we can resume this after.
Okay, well, we're not seeing her online. I don't know. All right, members, thank you very much. Can we, for the minutes?
So moved, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Confirmation of the minutes, seconded by Member Holness. Thank you. We go to item 6, new business. Can you invite the team in, please?
Chair, just from the minutes, there are a couple reports that are supposed to be coming. Right. So
the Ministry of National Security has asked us to give them until Friday, and then we'll just circulate those. Thank you. All right, let me welcome the team from the Ministry of Finance, the BOJ, and the PIOJ is here also. And let me just first apologize for the late start of this segment of the meeting. We had some in-house matters to deal with, and I think we're finally completed with that. But let me welcome the team, and I think we should proceed in having the Ministry of Finance make some opening remarks, and then we'll ask the BOJ and then PIOJ, and then we'll open to questioning. So you can also introduce the team or teams that you have here, and then proceed.
Good morning. Thank you. I think I'm just going to ask each person to introduce themselves. As you indicated, it's Ministry of Finance, PIOJ, and the Bank of Jamaica. First.
Good morning. I'm Loris Jarrett. I'm the head of the Public Expenditure Division in the Ministry of Finance and Public Service.
Good morning. I'm Diane Black, head of the Economic Management Division in the MOFPS. Thank you.
Good morning. Wayne Robinson, Senior Deputy Governor, Bank of Jamaica.
Good morning. Robert Stennett, Deputy Governor, Bank of Jamaica.
Richard Biles, Governor, Bank of Jamaica.
Wayne Henry, Director General, PIOJ.
Trevor Anderson, Principal Director, the Ministry of Finance.
Caroline O'Connor, Deputy Financial Secretary, Public Enterprises Division, Ministry of Finance.
Sonia Drasicki, Director, Debt Management Branch, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, Rochelle White, Senior Technical Advisor to the Director General at the PIOJ.
Turned off on, they weren't hearing.
Morning, Diego Thomas, Sector Director, Public Enterprises Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, I'm Seymour Davey, Senior Director, Public Expenditure Division, Ministry of Finance and Public Service.
Good morning, James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning and Research Division, PIOJ.
Hello, good morning. Naya Shagari, Director of Macroeconomy and Trade at the PIOJ.
Good morning. I'm Sevelyn Collins, Director of Sectoral Economic Planning at the PIOJ.
All right. So we'll be looking at the financial year 2022-23 central government budget and the medium-term economic outlook and recent economic developments and real sector performance. Today. So, Ms. Morris, would you go ahead and proceed with your opening remarks?
Okay, thank you, sir. So we would have submitted a submission, well, in fact, 3 pieces, one from the Ministry, the BOJ, and the Planning Institute. And the Ministry's position generally gives the overview of the macroeconomic profile that would have been utilized to project the budget and the medium term. And then it provides some more detailed information on the revenue and grants and the expenditure.
Sorry, Ms. Morris, because you have on a mask, you will have to speak a little louder. Or,
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will skip the macro section since I am sure it will be addressed by both the PIOJ and the BOJ, and just go to our budget. So the 2022-23 budget. is projected at $749.8 billion, the revenue side, or 30.3% of GDP. And this, as usual, is comprised of tax revenue, non-tax revenue, bauxite levy, capital revenue, and grants. On the expenditure side, we are programming $912 billion in total expenditure and payments, with $604.5 billion of that amount for non-debt expenditure and $307.5 billion for debt service. The non-debt expenditure is comprised of the recurrent expenditure at $539.5 billion and capital expenditure at $65.1 billion. It reflects an increase of overall fiscal year of $29.2 billion, or 5.1% on the previous fiscal year budget. The non-debt recurrent expenditure is comprised of compensation of $290.2 billion, recurrent programs $249.2 billion. The allocation for compensation reflects an increase of $46.8 billion, or 19.2%, over the 2021 third supplementary. And contributing to this significant increase is the compensation-related allowances that have been transferred from recurring programs where they were previously carried to the compensation category, and also the programmed implementation of the compensation restructure. Included in the non-debt expenditure also are social program provisions for public assistance and support to vulnerable persons. Among these are $800 million for the social pension program for the elderly, $480 million for rehabilitation and social intervention programs, and $7.9 billion for the PATH program. Further social assistance, which was announced by the minister, includes assistance to taxi operators of $800 million, and this is broken down as $600 million towards the provision of $25,000 per licensed vehicle to operators of public passenger vehicles, and $200 million in loan financing for public passenger vehicle operators. There is $152 million for increased transportation assistance to PATH students. There is an allocation of $2 billion to assist JPS customers. This is through the announced WeCare Energy Co-Pay program, which will contribute 20% of the JPS bill for postpaid residential customers, and also a specified sum for the prepaid customers. There is food assistance of $500 million also programmed, which will target approximately 75,000 persons. The minister also announced low Know Your Customer accounts that the government would provide $250 million towards providing $2,500 each to the first 100,000 bank customers who open low KYC accounts as of April 1, 2022, and also for the Jamdex accounts, another $250 million, comprised of $2,500 each to the first 100,000 individuals who open Jamdex accounts, also as of April 1, 2022. On the capital expenditure side, $65 billion has been allocated to fund the central government's public investment projects. Approximately $21 billion of this has been allocated for the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, $4.9 billion for the Montego Bay Perimeter Road, approximately $4 billion to the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries to facilitate completion of two major irrigation projects. Those are the Essex Valley and Southern Plains projects, and both of these are funded by grants from the CDB. A contingency provision of $5.3 billion is also allocated under the Ministry of Finance to support the public investment pipeline projects which are at an advanced stage in the approval process. The public debt expenditure for 2022-23 is projected at $307.5 billion, and this represents 48.5% of tax revenue compared to 49.1% estimated for 21-22. The debt service costs comprise amortization payments of $169.1 billion and interest payments of $138.4 billion. Financing for the $912 billion expenditure budget is comprised of revenue and grants of $749.8 billion, loan receipts of $124.1 billion, below the line inflows of $32.5 billion, and utilization of cash balances at $5.6 billion. We were also asked to provide an assessment of the risk to the fiscal year's budget and medium-term profile. So we have a short indication here indicating that the main risk to the central government 22-23 budget and the medium-term profile emanates from the potential for significant deviations from the macroeconomic profile on which the budget was built. The macroeconomic profile was developed prior to the commencement of the current Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is impacting commodity prices such as oil price worldwide and exacerbating the inflationary pressures, which were initially fueled by the impact of the health pandemic on the supply chain. Inflation locally has remained elevated since mid-2021, with the 12-month inflation consecutively exceeding the 4 to 6% target range since August 2021. The Russia-Ukraine war is therefore likely to result in higher than projected inflation for 2022-23, which will impact both the revenue and the expenditure sides of the budget. On the revenue side, higher prices within the context of relatively inelastic demand will increase tax revenue through elements such as special consumption tax and general consumption tax. On the other hand, public spending will be impacted negatively as the cost to the government for goods and services rises. Currently, the inflation risk is assessed to be tilted to the upside, indicating that the outturn is likely to be higher than the projection underlying the budget. Global growth is also likely to be negatively impacted by the current conditions in the international environment, with various embargoes against Russia affecting world trade. This may have a negative impact on Jamaica's GDP, mainly through the tourism channel, as income in economies of our main trading partners may become depressed. Tightened liquidity conditions could create challenges for the government to source financing on the domestic debt market. Additionally, debt service costs associated with new debt is likely to increase under these conditions. The macroeconomic situation is being monitored with a view to adjusting the 2022-23 budget and medium-term profile as may be necessary through supplementary budgets as the year progresses. That's it from me.
Thank you. We'll just move on to the Bank of Jamaica and then the PIOJ.
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Although much uncertainty abounds, the Jamaican economy has continued to recover from the effect of the pandemic and is expected to grow, notwithstanding headwinds from the current geopolitical situation around the world. I will, however, allow my colleague from the PIOJ to address the subject of GDP growth. A detailed report from the BOJ has been tabled to this Parliament, and I propose to focus these remarks that I'll make on three key areas for which a bank has responsibility, namely inflation and our efforts to contain it, the international reserves, and the financial system. The BOJ is concerned about high domestic inflation that has remained above the upper end of the bank's 4 to 6% target range since August 2021. The higher than target inflation is mainly driven by commodity price shocks, higher shipping prices, and supply chain disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The situation has been worsened by the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which has mainly had an impact on international commodity prices. Consequently, the bank has continued to take steps to minimize the pass-through of the commodity price increases to local prices, thereby facilitating a return of inflation to the target range in the shortest possible time frame. The annual headline inflation rate has now breached the target range for the 8th consecutive month. Inflation at March 22 was 11.3%, above the February 22 outturn of 10.7 and the January 22 outturn of 9.7. In March 2021, just a year ago, annual inflation was only 5.2%, and this gives an idea of the magnitude of the rise in inflation. When the bank did its forecast in November of 2021, the bank had projected that inflation over the next 2 years, that is December 21 to the September 2023 quarter, would breach the upper limit of the bank's target range over the next 7 to 9 months. Inflation was projected to end financial year 21-22 at 7.8% and close 22-23 at 5%. This forecast was based on the impact of increases in international commodity and shipping prices on domestic inflation and an improvement in domestic demand. The fall in inflation for 22-23 was conditional on relatively tighter monetary policy along with a moderation in international commodity prices. These forecasts, however, did not incorporate the impact of the Ukraine and Russia conflict on the domestic economy. As we see it, the risks to inflation are skewed to the upside, meaning that the Bank of Jamaica will revise its forecast upwards. The upside risks include higher international commodity and shipping prices associated with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, higher inflation among Jamaica's main trading partners, further increases in inflation expectations, and further increases in some regulated prices. The downside risks include lower external demand, particularly given a fifth wave of the pandemic in major economies like China. And secondly, weaker near-term domestic demand stemming from the impact of significantly higher oil and grain prices on the demand for Jamaican goods and services. These risks suggest that the average inflation for this fiscal year may go higher than we had projected in December 21 and will peak at a higher level than the 11.3% that currently obtains at March 2022. Against the backdrop of the inflation outlook, the bank has been tightening monetary policy by 1, increasing the bank's policy rate by 400 basis points since September of last year to 4.5%, and 2, pursuing other measures to contain Jamaican dollar liquidity expansion and maintain stability in the foreign exchange market. By these actions, the bank aims to influence inflation back to the target range over the next 2 years. They are intended to have 3 interrelated effects. 1, to cause liquidity in the financial system to fall and therefore cause interest rates on deposits and loans to rise. Secondly, to temper the demand for foreign currency and hence moderate the pace of depreciation in the exchange rate and its impact on inflation. And thirdly, to generally reduce demand in the economy and consequently businesses' ability to increase their selling prices to consumers. So far, liquidity in the financial system has declined, which has led to some stability in the exchange rate, and short-term interest rates have increased significantly. Banks have, however, been taking some time to pass on higher deposit and loan rates to all customers. For the calendar year to the 20th of April, the exchange rate has been more stable. For the calendar year to the 20th, it has depreciated by 0.3%. Bank of Jamaica has conducted 12 flash sale operations for the calendar year to date, amounting to $351.9 million. During this period, the bank also sold foreign currency directly to the energy sector. Since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020, all the way to this year, March, liquidity support of approximately $2.5 billion has been provided to the foreign exchange market. Bank of Jamaica remains committed to a flexible exchange rate, but will remain watchful to prevent the emergence of disorderly conditions in the foreign exchange market that will delay the return of inflation to the target range. Looking at our international reserves, our gross international reserves are more than adequate to sustain us through this difficult period. At the end of March 2022, the gross foreign assets amounted to $4.3 billion, $80 million US above the stock at the end of March of last year. The increase mainly reflects the recent IMF SDR allocation boost and strong remittance inflows during the period, partially offset by GOJ debt payments and B-Fixit sales. Flows on the current account to the balance of payments have been healthy, and the bank estimates that a current account surplus for financial year 21-22 exists, which reflects the strong remittance flows. The reserves are projected to remain adequate to pay the country's debt and to pay for imports of goods and services. There is no shortage of foreign currency in Jamaica. Looking on the financial system, generally speaking, the financial system is sound and adequately capitalized. Deposit-taking institutions have adequate liquidity to withstand expected shocks. The quality of their loan portfolio has also remained fairly stable and well below the international benchmarks for any concern. Preliminary data indicate that the growth in private sector loans and advances by deposit-taking institutions has decelerated at February 2022. Business lending, in particular, expanded much more slowly compared with the growth recorded at February of 2020. We thank the committee for the opportunity to present, and I wish to reiterate Bank of Jamaica's commitment to playing its role to return in inflation to the target range and to ensure that the financial system remains stable. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Henry.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman and members. Data from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica indicated that the economy grew by an estimated 4.6% for calendar year 2021, following a contraction of 9.9% in 2020. All industries grew, with the exception of the mining and quarrying industry, which contracted by 22.4%, mainly due to the closure of the Jamaica alumina plant in August 2021 as a result of a fire at the power plant. At the end of 2021, total real value added was 5.8% below its pre-COVID-19, that's the 2019 levels, with all industries below their pre-COVID-19 levels, except construction, agriculture, and producers of government services. Despite recording the largest increase in 2021 of 37.2%, real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry was 36.6% below its 2019 level, as it was the most negatively affected by COVID-19. For fiscal year 2021-22, Based on preliminary data, the Jamaican economy is on track to meet the growth projection of 7.9% for fiscal year 2021-22, as articulated in the 2022-23 fiscal policy paper. For the first 9 months of fiscal year 2021-22, that is April to December 2021, the Jamaican economy grew by 8.8%. The pace of growth is expected to slow in the January to March 2022 quarter, as the impact of a global spike in the coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 cases in January 2022 and the associated supply chain challenges restricted the pace of reopening and led to the reintroduction of lockdowns in some countries. This had a negative impact on external demand. Growth continued to be hindered by the impact of fire at the Jamaica alumina plant in August 2021, which led to the plant's closure and curtailed output in the mining and quarrying industry. Despite these shocks, the projected growth rate for fiscal year 2021-22 is consistent with the range of 6% to 10% articulated by the PIOJ in its report to the PAAC in October 2021. For the fiscal year, the main impetus for growth at the industry level were hotels and restaurants, mainly pushed by the recovery in visitor arrivals following the downturn recorded in the previous year as a result of the effect of COVID-19 and the associated public health and safety measures. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing, which was supported by improved weather conditions, which facilitated increased production of other agricultural products, which captures primarily domestic crops, and other services due to the resumption of activities in the entertainment and sports sectors. For fiscal year 2022-23, Jamaica's real GDP is projected to grow between 2% and 5% relative to fiscal year 2021-22. This will be facilitated by the removal of public health and safety measures locally through the withdrawal of the orders and measures under the Disaster Risk Management Act in March 2022. Additionally, increased economic activity globally is expected to strengthen external demand for Jamaica's goods and services. This growth range represents a downward revision relative to PIOJ's initial projections of 3% and 6%. Mainly as a result of the war in Ukraine, which is expected to lead to a slowing in global recovery and add to supply chain bottlenecks, and therefore temper the pace of external demand for Jamaica's goods and services. All industries are projected to grow, with the mining and quarrying industry and hotels and restaurants industry expected to record the strongest growth. Growth in the mining and quarrying will be pushed by the reopening of the Jamaica plant in the latter half of the year, while the performance of the hotels and restaurants industry will be driven by increased visitor arrivals and operational hours relative to fiscal year 2021-22. It should be noted that despite the expected slowing in the growth momentum, the economy is still on track to achieve its pre-COVID-19 GDP levels in fiscal year 2023-24. Speaking now to the downside risk and upside potential of these projections. PIOJ's growth projections remain fluid, given the increased uncertainty in the global economy as a result of the war in Ukraine, which has compounded the risks to growth. These risks have begun to materialize in a global economy that is still recovering from the health-induced recession, which skews the risk to growth downward. The following factors are expected to influence growth in the short to medium term. One, there is potential for the emergence of new and more virulent strains of COVID-19, given the relatively low rate of vaccination in the country, which increases the uncertainty with regard to normalization and may lead to the reimposition of public health and safety measures. Two, slower than expected growth in external demand due to weaker than projected growth in Jamaica's main trading partners. This has already materialized with the war in the Ukraine, and faster than initially projected increase in interest rates in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners as central banks move to address higher than desired inflation. The war in the Ukraine has compounded economic challenges, as many countries are still in the process of fully recovering from the economic and social onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic. The war is expected to delay the recovery process, with its negative impact manifested through higher commodity prices, particularly crude oil and grains, for which Russia and the Ukraine are significant market players. Russia also plays an integral role in the global production of fertilizers. The resultant adverse impact on the cost of living for households and the cost of production for firms is expected to have a dampening effect on economic activity. The pace of growth may slow even further if war extends beyond the Ukraine or lasts for an extended period. And 3, global supply chain challenges associated with COVID-19 induced factory closures and labor shortages that may disrupt the production process, also being further compounded by the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war. 4, slower than initially expected resumption of production at the Jamaica refinery. It is expected that 50% of Jamaica's capacity will be available at the end of June 2022, and 100% of capacity is expected to be available by the end of September 2022. 5, an expansion in sanctions on Russia that include UC Russell may have implications for production at the Windalco refinery. 6, stronger than expected tightening of monetary policy in response to domestic inflation. 7, weather-related shocks and its impact on the agriculture, forestry and fishing, and electricity and water industries. And 8, slower than expected implementation of Government of Jamaica projects, example the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP. Factors that may cause growth to be higher than expected would be 1, higher than expected external demand for Jamaica's goods and services, especially or specifically tourism, due to, among other things, a faster than expected growth in Jamaica's main trading partners. And 2, faster than expected refurbishing and upgrading of production plants, especially in the mining and quarrying industry. And 3, stronger domestic demand associated with a more robust increase in employment levels. Looking at the labor market update as at January 2022. Based on the labor force survey for January 2022, undertaken by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, improvements were recorded in all labor force indicators relative to January 2021. These included higher employment level, up 57,800 to 1,257,100 persons relative to January 2021. This continued the increasing trend of employment observed since the decline recorded in July 2020 due to COVID-19 and the public health and safety measures implemented, both globally and locally. However, employment remains below its pre-COVID-19 high, that was at January 2020. Improvements were recorded for females, up 29,600 to 570,500 persons, and males up 28,200 to 686,600 persons. And also lower unemployment rate, down 2.6 percentage points to 6.2%, the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded in Jamaica. This reflected a reduction in unemployed persons by 33,000 and an increase in the labor force by 24,800 persons. Improvements were recorded for females, down 2.5 percentage points to 7.9%, males down 2.7 percentage points to 4.8%, and youth, as persons 14 to 24 years old, down 5.1 percentage points to 17.7%. Based on the pace of recovery to date, Jamaica's employment level is on track to reach and surpass its pre-COVID-19 levels during fiscal year 2022-23. This is, however, dependent on most of the downside risks to growth mentioned not materializing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, members. I will now open the floor for any questions. Member Holness, and then Member Jackson, and Member Hamilton.
Couple questions. I'm not sure who will take them. PS, I know you're going to have to take some. I couldn't hear you very clearly in all respect. I think this one would be for the PS. How accurate would we consider our budget estimates to be at this stage? I know we would have supplemental estimates that will help with revising where our numbers will take us, given. Why are you laughing?
Not an interesting question. I wasn't laughing. I was consuming the question.
Okay, given our current reality and what is happening in terms of the war, I wanted Jamaicans to have a better appreciation, so I definitely need us to break it down in terms of our dependency on tourism and the revenues from tourism to fund our activities. Would we be able to go back to a place, if COVID continues, that we shut down again our tourism sector in the way that we were almost at probably less than 25% of visitor arrivals, like a real serious shutdown? And I asked that question in the context of being told that we have sufficient foreign assets or reserves. How long would those take us if these conditions prevail? Because the average man on the street is very dependent on us being able to respond with these COVID measures of We Care, all these packages, particularly small business people. When I'm out there, a lot of the SMEs, they are complaining that they need the support to take them through this period of crisis. And then last but not least, how do we compare to the rest of the world? Because when time gets tough, a lot of people still like to know that misery has company whenever they're miserable. And it is sometimes good when they're able to make the comparison and understand that Jamaica is doing exceptionally well under the circumstances, because the rest of the world is nowhere better than we are. We're all in this together.
Okay, so I'll take the first question. So as indicated, the budget is basically developed around what we expect to be our available financial resources. And the revenue resources are projected on the basis of the estimated macroeconomic indicators. So as indicated, at the point where the budget was developed, we would have had a different view of what was expected going forward than we do today, primarily because of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And therefore, in terms of accuracy is really going to be measured at the end of the year, but certainly we can see that with the war continuing and the impact of the war on the world, that the macroeconomic assumptions are likely to be different from what we had estimated, and therefore we are expecting to have to do some adjustments to the profile that was provided as the budget, because the expenditure, of course, would have been related to our expected inflow on the revenue side, and we operate with a fiscal balance target. So as we go through the year, we are expecting to do some adjustments. With the war continuing to this point, we can't say how much, but we are monitoring it.
How major in terms of adjustment, Ms. Morrison?
All right, so we're expecting the inflation to go up. But inflation is not just going to affect our expenditure side, it will also affect our revenue side. So there is some amount of balancing that will take place. If the impact, if there is a negative impact in terms of, let's say, the interest is also going up, the depreciation is continuing beyond where we had it programmed, then we may need to take some actual cuts. We may need to make some actual cuts on what we have programmed for expenditure. Otherwise, But it is something that we are looking at and will be doing scenarios to determine what we do in another few months. But both sides get affected, so it's not that it's just affecting one side. So it is still possible that we could still do what we have budgeted to do, but at different levels of expenditure and revenue. I think I'll pass.
If I could address the issue you raised about the foreign exchange adequacy. We're accustomed to measuring that in number of months of imports. It's about 5 months, but 5 months of adequacy, which is way above the 3 months or so that. But a more accurate measure is what is known as the ARA, which looks at all the obligations, including debt payments and imports. The standard is 100% ARA. We are at 128. So we are not only adequate, but we have a buffer above adequate.
Right, thank you. Members, you've said, as we think of Jamaica relatively to other countries, or relative to other countries, globally there's been severe impact in terms of the fallout from COVID-19, as we know. And again, a knock-on with the war in the Ukraine. As we think of recovery and the period of recovery as countries began to emerge from the impact of the 2020 COVID-19, Jamaica would have recorded, I think, the highest growth rates in the Caribbean, and certainly very significant as you think of relative to the rest of the world. And initially, the initial thought was because of the low base year over year, as you measure growth, because many countries would have had a fallout. As you measure recovery, then it would be significant for everyone, but that hasn't been the case. But Jamaica has had significant growth, which suggests that policies matter. And in terms of going into the pandemic, we were in a relatively better position, having had secured years of improving conditions in our macroeconomic stability, reduced debt, albeit still, like many other countries having a significant still burden of debt, but we having reduced from the 148% to just over 90%, gave us more space and room to maneuver and respond, and having made some decisions in terms of public expenditures, giving us a capacity to respond as we did. And I think some significant efforts as we reopen the tourism industry and the tourist sector, having established a resilient corridor and sensitizing persons around the messaging of relative safe return to tourism. So a number of things that we have been seemingly commended for relative to other countries in terms of what's going on. But nonetheless, it's still a challenging time as we seek to secure more robust growth levels as we recover the economy.
You completed? Yes? Okay. I remember Jackson.
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to pick up from a question last asked by Member Holness regarding some of the targets. Madam Pierce, yes, there's a inflation rate of 5% projected, and you indicated that you might have some movement there. The oil is a major component in our economy, which we all imported. And the average price that I think the budget was based on is 67.5 US per barrel. Currently, 1 month into the budget year, it's over 50% higher than that. Yeah, it's between 105 and 109, 1 month into the budget year. Given the significance of oil for the energy sector and the economy as a whole, and the ripple effect throughout the economy, transportation, manufacturing costs, and all the rest of it. At this stage, Member Holness asked if you're going to need a supplementary budget. I remember the Minister of Finance in his budget presentation indicated to the House that these numbers and assumptions were very reliable, but 1 month after, just by oil alone, we see that as a major fallout. I would love your comment on that in a moment. The PIOJ, the growth rate, it is projected to be, well, you mentioned a number of areas that you expect if those happen. Yeah, I take it. Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So you want the PS to answer and then the PIOJ then?
Okay, sir. So yes, the oil price would have shifted from what we utilized to do the budget. But again, as I've been indicating, for the government, we have taxes that are actually on the oil and on other things as well. And as the oil price changes, there is some amount of change on our taxes. The level of taxes will increase alongside the increase in oil, in the prices of the oil. And that ripple effect through the economy as well will also see some level of increase in things like our GCT. So again, it is not that just one side will change. We have both revenue and expenditure changing. On the expenditure side, we are able to adjust our expenditures if we are looking at fallouts or increases above what we are able to undertake given our targets. So, as I said, we are monitoring where we are and where we are going in terms of the general country, in terms of the country overall. Certainly, the minister would have announced, as indicated, some level of assistance to some of the direct impact areas where there would have been a direct impact from the increase in oil prices to the taxi operators, to the JPS customers for a period of time. There is some assistance being provided there. But as happens across the world, when prices change on certain commodities, other things move. So we expect to come back into some level of balance as we move along. We also don't know how long the Russia-Ukraine conflict is going to continue. So we are looking at the situation and making decisions as we go along. And certainly we are expecting to see a supplementary budget in the future.
So just before you go, Member Jackson, there's a point that you make that I want the PS to clarify. Madam PS, Member Jackson said that the budget was predicated on a 67.5 ministry, and he said that the oil price is now 105, 109. I can recall the Minister of Finance talking about that it is the price that is quoted from time to time, comparing to the 67, is not comparing apple with apple. And so I would want to know if the price that Member Jackson is quoting now, is it indeed 105 to 109?
Just for context, the number I quote is not my number. It's a number that is on the world market. I just refer to it. And if it is not so, it can be corrected. But I'm only referring to the quoted world price, which I don't think the FS differed up with.
Yes, it is over 100. I cannot quote the exact amount at this point in time. We will have to get back to you on that.
You want to continue?
Yeah, I want to follow up. I was about to shift a little too, because you all did a combined presentation, so to speak. The growth.
Sorry, it was 102 up to yesterday.
102, yeah. Around the same. Yeah, it varies. Dr. Henry, regarding the growth. Yes, we had depressed growth during the last financial year for the obvious reason. Tourism, which is our major foreign exchange earner, was down. notwithstanding the measures to preserve some of the tourism revenues through the corridor there in the tourism sector to at least protect some amount of visit and revenues there. Now it's open. The sector is completely open. We have no restriction on travel into into Jamaica from our major tourist markets, mainly the US, Canada, the UK. So one would expect to have uninhibited expansion in the tourism sector, which is the major one. Why the projected reduction in growth with that sector being fully open now compared to, say, a year ago? That's one. And another question. The bauxite alumina sector. Windalco and Jamalco is our two major producers now, correct? The one in Alpart, what's the name of it now? Gisco has been down. When is your projection for that to come back in full force? Because I remember the last time you were here, a lot of your optimism was posited on that plant coming back and adding to the growth. It has not happened. When do you project that is likely to be, and what informs that confidence?
So thank you very much, Member. In terms of for GISCO, we anticipate fiscal year 24-25 for resumption there. He said for this year we expect from coming out of for Jamalco from recovery from the fire and so. So as we've yes.
Microphone.
No, you answered for Jamalco.
Yes.
You in your presentation.
I did.
If I never made it.
So you're saying for GISCO?
GISCO,
yes.
I was, yes.
For 24-25. James, you want to add? Go ahead, please.
Based on the last discussions we had with the GISCO operators, they are not scheduled to come back on stream until fiscal year 24-25. It's not, it will not impact performance this year.
All right, and so for the earlier question, because of the impact specifically of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, that's where a lot of the downward revision, right? Because we were recovering and still in that state of recovery, but then had to revise downward as we've outlined because of that impact. We say through commodity prices, through tighter conditions in terms of that would restrict aggregate demand. So those factors would largely lead to that revision that we've seen from the range of 3 to 6% down to 2 to 5%.
To another question I had to ask regarding the projected revenues from the bauxite alumina sector. Given the major role that Windalco places in that whole scenario, the last time around when there was sanctions against Russian owned and held, Windalco was put in a very precarious position, and their ability to sell, to export, was significantly compromised. Any consideration being made, since there is almost a global call for sanctions against Russian business operators? You want to comment on?
So we did, member, thank you for that. We did mention that that's a potential issue if they were to, as you know, carry out in terms of certain sanctions that would affect Windalco. We said that their engagements with the industry suggest that there's a positioning to insulate themselves in terms of exposure, because recall in the last go round it was an issue of majority shareholder, as we were trying to target oligarchs who would have holdings in alumina, and the issue was to limit exposure from that majority shareholding standpoint to minimize the impacts of sanctions. So we have said as a potential risk, but from what we are seeing so far, it hasn't materialized. But again, let me ask James if he's covered it. So that's our understanding.
In the revenue side referred to by FS is $4.9 billion projected from bauxite levy. So if you don't have any business, you can't generate you know.
I said we don't anticipate at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that was, I was giving you context in
yes,
terms
okay.
of the relevance of it.
Thank you
because of the
so
significant reliance on the bauxite levy.
Thank you, Member.
BOJ, with your permission.
Sorry, just to note that the bauxite levy has some amount of arrears in there. There are programmed payments. There's a schedule.
From behind. Okay, okay. Not so much so the new, okay. But I believe nonetheless, their undertaking to pay their arrears is predicated on their current.
The question is what percentage of that?
Yes. What percentage of the 4.5 is arrears?
Yeah.
4.9 is arrears.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Now, Governor, in your opening statement, you indicate that there are three particular areas that the BOJ focuses on: inflation, reserve, and the banking system stability. And much has been said about the inflation side. You know one of my pet peeves, Governor, about the banking system that you preside over. You are the one on behalf of the country that manage our banking system. Governor, the last time you were here before the Standing Finance Committee of Parliament, I asked some questions. That was sometime in January. And I have not gotten those answers. I've spoken to the clerk of the House, because the questions came through the committee of the House, and up to today, what date of May is this? Whatever the date is. January, February, March, April, May, 5 months. And I'm yet, 4+ months, I am yet to get the answers to those questions. And quite frankly, Governor, I see it as a contemptuous position of the bank, because the Parliament, through its committee, poses some question. What my response to the question is another matter. I made a duty to ask the clerk of the House to send a reminder over 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, about the answers that was posed to the Bank of Jamaica, and up to then, the House had not received it. I don't know if it got lost, the response got lost in communication. But as I speak to you now, as a member who asked that question, those questions, I'm yet to receive them. And the clerk has not advised me of having received those. So that is one of the challenges that I have. Because I don't ask questions for my own personal consumption. They are questions pertinent to the citizens of this country and all of us. And as a public institution, there's an obligation, not a privilege, an obligation to respond to those things that are of public interest and affects the government. So I have a little peeve regarding that. I don't know if you want to respond to that before I go into the other questions.
Well, just to say I apologize, member. I will ask to get the questions again. I personally don't recall getting them, apart from you speaking to them in a meeting. I will ensure that I get them and we'll answer you.
And any timeline, because I don't anticipate they're going to take another 4 months.
No, certainly not.
So
by the end of next week?
By the end of next week?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's it. In the report, it indicates that generally there's stability in the banking system, which is good. I remember following the mid to late 1990s when we had the experience we had and the overall that took place of BOJ. One of the main goals of the reform, the regulatory reform of the banking system and BOJ in particular, was to ensure greater stability in our banking system for the benefit of us all. There has been in the report a fall off of business loans in the banking system, in the economy. Could you care to comment about what might contribute to that? And against the background of, in the report, there is great stability in terms of loans being adequately serviced and so forth that are being held by the banks. Could you care to give some comments on that?
Thank you. Well, the stability has really been because of the years of improved regulation and the building of capital in the banks. So the lessons that we learned out of the mid-90s have been applied, and that has put us in a much stronger position. When I say us, I mean the financial system going into this, this challenging period. So that stability has been hard won, and I expect that it will continue. The other part of your question?
The quality of loans.
Yeah, well, the quantity.
Quantity, yes, and the performance of the loans.
Yeah, so remember, we are coming out of the pandemic, and I think there's a natural lack of demand for loans coming out of that period. But also because we have tightened monetary policy, raised rates a bit, business community is a little bit more cautious about investing at this time. And, you know, that is, in a way, what the Bank of Jamaica wants. And this is an issue that we don't always understand. In fighting inflation, something pays a price, and oftentimes that's growth, and that's so universally. Right throughout every economy of the world, if you are fighting inflation, growth pays a price. So in raising interest rates, we are trying to slow the economy somewhat, and what that does is prevent prices from being hiked, and in that way restrain inflation. Fortunately for Jamaica, a lot of the growth potential that exists is in the export side, whether it has to do with tourism or BPO. And our interest rate regime has nothing to do with that, in essence. So we don't expect that it will affect overall growth in the economy, but it will have an impact of dampening domestic economic growth.
But further to that, Governor, that tightening up, there's a decrease in business loan, but there's an increase in consumer loans. For growth, would it be, you're the economist, that we want to stimulate more business loans that can, especially those in the productive sector, right? We would want more loans in that area to provide for the growth that we want. On the other hand, and it might be a little bit confusing to say, when I hear said about fighting inflation, growth pays the price. Because I would believe that the more you produce and you increase supply, it can help to suppress inflation. That is my little 101 econ from undergrad. But you're the economist. You want to elaborate on that?
So I don't know that personal loans, I can ask Dr. Robinson, I don't know that personal loans have grown. Yes, it's just growing slow. Yeah, so
going slow. Okay,
yes,
I might have picked
both business loans and personal loans are growing, but growing slow.
Following up from Member Jackson, that's where my concern is, because ultimately it is the average man, the small man. If we have a policy of trying to suppress inflation, yes, they will quarrel about the price of things and quarrel about food price and gas price and taxi price. But equally, when we suppress demand, how does that affect the small producers, the farmers, the small businesses in being able to eke out a living as we recover? Because I feel that is exactly where the impact is going to go from our policy of trying to control the level of inflation, suppressing demand, increasing the price of loan, not just commercial, but to the small man as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but remember, it's universal. In any economy, in any part of the world, if you are trying to restrain inflation, you are going to restraining growth. Hopefully, we don't have to restrain it for a very long period of time, and hopefully we don't damage the growth potential as we restrain it.
P.S., I know this would have come from Minister, but just in the context of the discussions we're having, what is the level of support again that we are planning to offer to the people of Jamaica, business and otherwise, through these intervention packages? What is the price tag? Just so persons have an appreciation that, yes, it is rough, but there is help in the budget.
Member.
I believe the overall amount is somewhere in the vicinity of $4 billion between the various things that are being provided. So there's the $800 million for the taxi operators, 512 additional to increase transportation for the past students, $2 billion on the We Care Energy co-pay program, $550 million food assistance, and then there's the $500 million between the low KYC and the Jamdex accounts.
Further to that question, FS, those support, how do they measure up to the level of, is it a $10 billion, $20 billion gap that is created that need remedy? Because I think the Ministry of Finance, in arriving at some support, would have had data to indicate what is the extent of the challenge to then determine what the input is or would be, or is it a number just arbitrarily arrived at?
All right, so we would not have a concrete fix on extent of the challenge. We recognized that with the adjustments to the macroeconomic variables that we were potentially looking at, that some assistance, temporary assistance, would be helpful.
Yeah, I hear that, FS, but in my constituency, when a constituent come to me with a challenge and say, MP, I need some help, one of the first questions I ask is that, what is the extent of the problem? What is the extent of the help required to then determine how and to what extent I can assist to mitigate it? Is it a $1 million challenge or a $1,000 challenge? And what I can do is a separate issue, but at least it gives me an appreciation to the extent to which I am intervening, because maybe I can't make the full intervention needed by myself from what funds I have as MP, and I have to look at other sources, but at least I have a pragmatic appreciation for the scope of the challenge that constituent face. And I think nationally it's no different. You as government, I think, must have some data that informs the extent of the problem that is faced by each person to whom some support is going to be given. I don't know if it's starting our PIOJ that is going to gather that data, but it must be data-driven. Otherwise, it's just arbitrarily doing something. I don't like to help to just look like I'm helping and don't have a sense of to what extent I'm helping to solve the problem. So that's the basis of asking that question. What informs the government's, the ministry's level of support, whether to the taxi driver, whether to the pensioners, whether for the unemployed, whichever cohort that support is targeting? We must know as a country what's the extent of the problem, because we don't know what we need to do to solve it.
Okay, sir, so the problem is evolving. The oil prices, as has already been raised, are going up, and therefore there are things that we would have been seen at some point, but some assistance was decided on. The assistance is within the context of what the government could provide as well, because there are other things that the government needs to do. So the ones we announced, the ones that the minister announced, are in addition to the social assistance that is generally there and would also have increased with a new fiscal year. So there is the regular path that has continued at an increased level. There is the social assistance to the pensioners. All of those have continued. These are just on top of those.
So in summary then, FS, the government does not know?
The government does not know because it's something that's evolving and will not know until the end of the year if you were to do an assessment.
The COVID is 2 years going.
Member Jackson, and because PS is under that mass and I'm not hearing everything clearly, again, I come back to the same discussion we had the last time, PIOJ and Statin and FS was here. For someone like myself who has been in accounts and have been compelled to budget, I remember having a heated argument with my chairman of the company at the time when I refused to budget outside of what was reasonable estimates based on history and what we could project. The numbers can be anywhere from 0 to a zillion if you decide that you are going to budget in a particular way. And so we have to always give credence to the fact that you are using the available information, all the technical knowledge and expertise that you have in the past to put forward the best possible scenario. A budget cannot make sense if the budget is based on wide speculations. And so we will always have to come back to accepting that this is the best possibility of what you think reality will be. And as reality unfolds, we have something called the supplementary estimate.
If I can just add on 2 points that we, as FSU say, as a dynamics change, we keep up, right, and try to measure. But we have from our, whether the survey of living conditions, we have an estimate of persons in the population below the poverty line, we have persons on path. So we have, there's quite a bit that informs the interventions made, right? And so, but you know, things change. And so one of the particular characteristics of the COVID-19 pandemic, because it was so far-reaching, and if you compare it to the previous global economic crisis in 2008 to 2012, over that 4-year period, we lost maybe a little over 90,000 jobs. That's here in Jamaica. That's 4 years. In a 4-month period, from March through to maybe June, you lost 150,000 jobs. So that's severe impact. And the nature of the pandemic was such that you had to try to combat it, you had to limit people movement. And in a Jamaican economy where we are a lot of transaction-based MSMEs, and so that hurt hard. And so we were informed by a lot of the numbers we had, but particularly we had, you know, those persons close to the poverty line who were working, what you call the working poor, that were then impacted by the limitations on people movement, etc. So that's part of that dynamic that makes it difficult, but we are informed by aggregates that we use as we monitor the economy. As Governor was saying, just to support the point, and as you said, member, because of the damaging effect of higher than anticipated inflation, because remember now, inflation is that sustained increase in prices which erodes persons' ability to purchase in terms of the purchasing power of money. In a context where you have an aging population, where persons are receiving fixed incomes, a number of persons on pension, or where contracts are fixed for an extended period and persons don't have the flexibility to increase incomes and increase wages in the same way as prices increase, then that's one of those big enemies that you have to target. And so even the structure of a central bank that is targeted inflation, we all agreed as a country that is the way to go in keeping with best practice. And so as Governor said, there's a trade-off that if you're seeing higher than anticipated levels of price increase, globally you've seen that challenge. And what that does again in terms of exacerbating or worsening in terms of poverty levels. And so it's something that you have to tackle in a certain way. And that's part of the balance that we spoke of. But I think a lot goes into that planning apparatus as we've seen here in Jamaica. And I think that's to be commended.
All right, Member Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand the intricacies involved in the budgetary exercise, but I want to, from a more practical standpoint, understand some of the initiatives of the government that will place us in an advantageous position where the budget is concerned. So I'll go back to the presentation made by the FS, where it was mentioned that compensation of employees was 290.2 billion. Now, from observation, that is more than 50% of the non-debt recurrent expenditure. I also note that in the public domain, there has been discussion about the restructuring of compensation of the public sector. And personally, I support the restructuring exercise as someone who operated within the government service for a number of years, because I found that system to be quite inequitable. My question, from this restructuring exercise, is there or will there be significant savings to the government in the medium term? Because I do find that the percentage for compensation is unsustainable. That's the first of a part 3 question. The second part, outside of this public sector compensation restructuring exercise, what other initiatives can we look forward to in the medium term, short to medium term, as cost-saving measures for the government, and in general, the restructuring or rationalization of the public service? And 3, how will performance management of MDAs feature in this transformation process, and how much will technology be infused in these initiatives? And I'll allow you to answer that, and then I go to the other questions.
Okay, with respect to the compensation restructure, and will there be savings? In the immediate future, no, there will not be savings, because the compensation review, which would have indicated that the public sector is operating at approximately 53% of the market at salaries that are approximately, on average, 53% below market. And therefore, in terms of what we are doing now, which has been indicated as moving the public sector to market level salaries, we would not expect that this initial implementation will result in savings per se. I would, however, like to indicate that in terms of, if you look at the global, if you globally think about what is thought of as compensation, or what could be viewed as compensation, the public sector currently has a number of elements that are not generally monetized. So apart from the basic salary and the monetary allowances, there are some benefits that the public sector currently receive. In the overall restructure that is taking place, most of those benefits will not continue in the form that they are currently in. So certainly something that has been in the news is the concession, which I don't think anybody has been putting a value to. No, we will have to remove that once we move to a market level salary structure for the public sector, because there is therefore no reason for that to continue. But you would need to look at things like that in terms of how the overall impact on the government will be felt. So with the removal of the concession, then you certainly are looking at higher revenue levels on the government side. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we can try to do a comparison of exactly what has changed to determine the overall savings. But if you're just looking at the monetary, what's paid now, then no, you would not be looking at savings. You'd be looking at an increase in the straight monetary compensation framework. As we move across the medium term and into the longer term, we are expecting that the restructure that we are putting in place will in fact assist the government in managing its better managing its operations, because you will now be able to reduce, let's say, distortions. What they're aiming for is what's called a single spine. So across the public sector, they will all be aligned on a single salary spine, and all of that will contribute to savings as you move forward, as opposed to what currently exists. Mm-hmm.
There's a clarification on a point at the duty concession that was mentioned. My understanding is that with the duty concession, there is an upper limit. It applies up to a certain US dollar amount price. And after that,
category or scale that you're working at.
Okay. Now, if you said you want to, it has a value, and what you want to do is to just take it away and attach a value to it and give it to the employee. Okay? Now, that is renewable every 5 years. All right? You can sell the vehicle after 3 years, but you can't use it until 5 years' time. So it's renewable. All right? It's not a one-off thing. And it's a range, right? While you have an upper limit, right? In fact, it's not just so much a range, you have an upper limit for different categories up to that. An employee who is at the lower end this year and next 2 years, he can, through whatever means, family give him or her some money and can buy a more expensive vehicle. He now will not be able to benefit from that because you have capped it. You have, in fact, you have put a value, and that's it. So in my mind, FS, there are some nuances, and it's not as sharp as I think you presented it just now. You know, it's a value, and you just remove it, put a value on it, give them the amount of money, which is the same story I hear from the minister, right? So when we hear those kind of representations, and I think the public sector workers who hear it too, I'm not the only one who hearing it, it comes across as not being very fulsome in terms of how it works. I would want to believe, and from my own, in my other life, being a co-worker of yours in the ministry, that those matters are best resolved by sitting around the table and arriving, because one of the principles in labor relations, you don't take away a benefit unilaterally. If you're going to make changes, because you already have the benefit, if you're going to make changes to it for efficiency, what have you, you sit around the table with the affected party, those who would be affected, and arrive at an alternative. But the impression being given from the ministry, this is what it is going to be, whether you like it or not, rather than to say, we wish to do this and we wish to arrive at a more efficient way. That, I think, is rubbing it hard for many people in the public sector who are beneficiary or potential beneficiary of this provision. It's a benefit that they have. True bargaining.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Our FS, in response to the question of Member Jackson, he was very strident because in the minister's presentation and even our subsequent discussions, particularly civil servants are not at a point where they fully appreciate that they will not actually suffer any reduction in benefit. And the minister has said this in a general way. However, from an accounting standpoint, I know we can be much clearer in saying if the cap was $50,000 US CIF, that has been calculated in Jamaican dollars of Y. It is being divided and it's spread over 5 years. So you are absolutely not being denied anything at all that you would have had before. In my case, since I have never used my concession, I am looking forward to that money. But many persons look forward to using the concession, and it is a very, very hot topic, burning issue. So I don't see any hands up for any other questions. Oh. All right. Oh, she just accommodated.
I was being accommodated by the member.
You accommodated you. All right. All right. That's what I was wondering. If you had another question.
There are two other questions that were not answered in terms of what other measures we can look forward to in the medium to short to medium term in relation to cost-saving measures for the government and the general restructuring of the public service. That's one. And the other one was in relation to performance management of MDAs. I find that we don't spend a lot of time on that aspect of how government operates.
Okay, so in addition to the compensation restructure, there is a wider transformation of the public service that is underway, has been underway for a few years. Among the things being done in that transformation is the development of shared services. We have shared services being developed for approximately 7 elements, HR, procurement, audit, a number of areas, and that is expected to a large extent utilize digital technology to improve the efficiency in those areas. We also have rationalization of the public bodies taking place, where the overall 100 plus public bodies were looked at, and areas have been identified, whether for merger, for incorporation into the main ministry, or for closure, and those are also underway. Quite a number of them have already been done, and that continues in terms of restoring the government to its core activity of providing public goods. So
a lot of these activities, though, seemingly take forever, which brings me back now to the performance management aspect of how government operates.
Right. Just a note, though, I think we have at least 45 public bodies that have already been addressed, and that continues. On the performance management, alongside the compensation restructure, well, actually, by the time the compensation restructure is fully implemented, there is expected to be the introduction of a different performance management system, which will better manage performance or reward exceptional performance, and not just getting the regular work done, but exceptional performance will be rewarded. So that is coming as well.
But I think regular performance needs to be looked at as well.
Right, so your regular performance, you are provided with a salary for it.
No. I mean, in terms of at the end of each financial year, or however you want to do it, a balanced scorecard approach, what are some of the strategy initiatives to be undertaken within that particular year? Have they actually been realized, that sort of thing?
Right. So it's the new performance management system is being developed by the Cabinet Office in association with the Ministry of Finance and the TIU. There is, in fact, a performance system in place currently.
That doesn't work very well.
Right, so that is why a new one is coming.
Looking forward to that new one.
If I may, on the compensation restructure, the government is currently in discussion with the unions. So the government is not unilaterally implementing anything. It has been talking with the various unions, and they are, in fact, to come back to us, and the talks continue.
Okay, my other question. Dr. Henry spoke of the risks to the medium-term outlook. And you mentioned a risk being the slower than expected implementation of GOJ projects vis-a-vis a potential stronger domestic demand associated with a more robust increase in employment levels. Now, I am going to ask in relation to that, where we are with the start to the Montego Bay Perimeter Road project. Whether everything is in place for that to begin. That would help with employment, for sure.
To answer no. We'd have to find out to get back to you on
The
that.
Ministry of Finance may be able to assist with that response.
Right, so we're expecting it to get underway this fiscal year. I don't have the details right now as to when, but we can get that information and provide.
Okay, looking forward to that, FS.
Member, if I may add, currently the designs for the project is being finalized, so we expect perhaps in the final quarter some construction activities may start.
Oh, okay.
So they are currently finalizing designs.
Okay, well, noted. The We Care Energy Co-pay program that was referenced, I'm asking this question for clarity because persons have approached me asking me already, when is the government going to pay my JPS bill? But I think maybe further information should be provided as it relates to not when the bill is generated, as in the April bill, but it is in relation to consumption within the month of April that would be paid in May. Is that the correct understanding of the government paying 20% for April, May, June, July?
Right, so the bills generated for April will be, for the postpaid bills, the government will pay 20% of those bills. For the prepaid bill, the government will be paying approximately $3,000 per month. There is actually a sign-in scheduled for today with the JPS of the MOU. I think it's about 12:30 today at the ministry, but the procedures are all already in place, so the JPS will be providing us with the information and we will be making the payments in relation to the April within the next few days. What you will see is what has been paid appearing on your next bill, not this one, but on the next one, and that will be removed from what is due on the next bill.
So just for clarity, so it is for the bill that was generated in April and not for the April consumption? So there's a difference, because I think the bill that is generated in April is for consumption in March. Right, so that's why I'm asking for clarity in relation to this, because it can really cause a little issue.
It's essentially going to be related to the April consumption, so that's why I said in the next few days, because we needed April to come to an end before we would get the bills.
So it is for payment in May?
Yes, so the first payment is going to be in May.
Okay, so I can now give further clarity.
To Member Hamilton's point, but I'm just simply for the bill generated in April, right? And those are, he said, prepaid customers, so they would have paid before. Post date. For those persons who are, well, for those who prepaid, right? Because JPS does have a category of customers who are mainly low-end users who they pay before. So those who have prepaid for the month of April, would they be credited?
We will be paying $3,000 for them. In terms of how exactly that prepaid piece is implemented, I would prefer to get the facts.
Okay. Well, just be mindful that there are some who would have paid before. I can see with the postpaid, they get bill after you use. Okay.
And then my final question is in relation to the JAMDEX and the low KYC accounts. Where are we in the registration, the take-up of that, and when will the $2,500 be paid to the first 100,000 customers? How close are we to that target?
Okay, so with respect to the JAMDEX, we are very close to the 100,000. For April, I think we were at 83%? 83,000, at approximately 83,000. So we're expecting that by the end of May, we will have made the 100,000. On the low KYC, that take-up has not been as quick. So we were at about all right, I'll give you that figure in a while. However, in terms of the payments, the information has been provided to us, and we have disbursed to the Bank of Jamaica, who will then pass this to the relevant banks. I can't definitively say that the money is in the bank accounts, but the government has disbursed. And the government, if it's not there, it should be there shortly for the ones who were recorded for April.
In terms of the low KYC, though, I'm not sure, how are we promoting this to the public? The take-up, she says, is low, but she's not aware of the actual figure now. But in terms, for the KYC, the low KYC accounts, take-up is low, but what are we doing to promote it to the public? I see the jam decks everywhere. I mean, I get messages all the time about that one. But for the low KYC, I don't see anything.
It's really the commercial banks that are doing that promotion. And one in particular, NCB, do it alongside Jamdex.
Can I just, because, Governor and FS, I mean, we have always complained about the percentage of the population that is able to have a bank account or get access to a bank account. And we have had many, many deliberations about competition in the banking sector, in how hard it is to move from one bank to another because of the KYC that is needed. Wouldn't it be in the best interest also for where we're going, where the Bank of Jamaica is going, to partially take on part of that marketing of that KYC account, to have more Jamaicans having a bank account that we can, instead of paying by cash or check, doing the transfers? Wouldn't it be in the best interest of the BOJ and the Ministry of Finance to take on part of that promotion?
Yes, I accept that. And that is something we could look at.
Yeah, because I find that the financial institutions, when it is not too much to their advantage, that they themselves, in many policies that we even pass in this House, they themselves really don't take on the promotion of it, you know. So it's a suggestion that I hope you can.
Just to say, part of the problem is this, that when you try to get people who are not in the banking system, they are somewhat reluctant for several reasons, not the least of which is that they pay fees, Member Jackson. What is good about CBDC is that there are no fees attached. So if you marry KYC with CBDC, you get a better response. Problem is we only have one commercial bank so far that is in a position to recruit you to CBDC, and that is NCB. Right, so although we have this campaign, it's really only one bank that has the ammunition, the selling power, the CBDC, to actually market KYC also. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't discuss with NCB and encourage and support where we can. And I take that point and we will do it.
Chairman, with your permission, in fact, one of the questions that I had posed to the governor the last time before the Standing Finance Committee was in regards to the KYC issue, to allow portability across banks by having a basic set of customer questions that applies across banks and is the basis of opening an account. So that if person A is fed up with bank Bank D, they can just give written permission to transfer that KYC to the other bank, and the bank is basically obliged to get fulfilling BOJ standards, and they can open another account. The fact of the matter is that many persons, including myself, become frustrated to go reproduce a set of information to another bank to open an account, whereas if I just write an instruction to say pass it to Bank B, I can start transaction over there. Yeah. That is the basis of it. And interestingly, at the height or the beginning of the whole banking fee issue, when I met with all the CEO of the banks, that was one of the issues that they raised, that competition was compromised because of the lack of portability. They can't port from one bank to the other. And for the past many years, the BOJ, before you, Governor, and since you, has not done anything to ameliorate that situation, and the problem prevails. That's one. But it's one interesting, Governor, that in my opening questions regarding the banking system and the stability amidst COVID for the past 2 years, the banking system have remained in a strong position. In your response, you mentioned that it was the regulations of the BOJ. And what struck me, Governor, is that the banks say that, and the minister stood here and says that regulation of banks is a dangerous thing. But you confess that is the regulation of the BOJ that has preserved the stability. And we know that before you saying it. Subsequent to what happened in the mid-1990s, when the banks were allowed to lend as they wish, that caused havoc in the financial sector, that brought about FinSac to rescue account holders because of the banking practices. So this notion about regulation is going to hamper and impede the banking. It's a dishonest comment to make, because you have confirmed this morning that is the regulations of the BOJ that has preserved the stability of the banking system. It happened during the 2008-2009 global economic situation that the Jamaica banking system was able to withstand all of that. Through this crisis, it has withstood that because of the strong regulatory regime that you and your institution have instituted. So, you know, it really cuts me hard when I hear the deafening silence of the BOJ when the crap being mentioned out there about regulation and undermine the banking system. It's regulations to protect the banking system that has preserved it. And what is being sought with the banking fee regulation is to protect the consumers while the bank's liquidity viability is preserved. Balancing it. None of the banks complaining about losses over all those turbulent periods. None. Yeah. But the depositors, they are the ones who suffer annually. And on the surface of it, Governor, your institution appear complicit with that which has been taking place by the banks, because you are the regulator. For example, the question I asked about the bill of exchange provisions, and whether it violates the charge by the banks for encashing fees, not a violation of it. From January to now, not one whisper about it. And every single day, depositors or persons who are paid with a check have to pay a fee for encashments. And in my own judgment, I have to now take out a private lawsuit, or go to the courts privately to do what the regulator, the protector of the people's interest should go before the court and ask for a review of the law, in the same way that the Bank of Jamaica did absolutely nothing when the banks were charging the dormancy fee, which was a violation of the existing Banking Act, not the amendment that was being sought in the bill that I tabled, the existing act. So the banks violate the laws, get away with it, and you, the regulator, keep dead silent. Who is going to protect the people out there if you are not going to do it? And you are the legal institution. If you can't do it, who else is going to do it? That is the gravamen of it, Governor. The silence of the BOJ on these legal issues.
All right, let's have the Governor respond.
So, Minister Jackson, I appreciate your passion on this, and it's a passion that I share too, and I think most Jamaicans. The fact is that we need, our Bank of Jamaica Act doesn't give us all the tools that we need to manage how a DTI, a commercial bank, relates to their customers. Right? And so a Consumer Protection Act is coming, and I believe it's, is it this year, Wayne, or is it next year?
4 years.
No, that act is being drafted and will be here hopefully this year, I'm not sure. But that is what will give real teeth to the organization, to the central bank, to monitor and manage and administer some of the worst aspects of the relationship between DTIs and customers. For the KYC, you'll be happy to know that we have it in our strategic plan. It's not an easy thing that we can just say tomorrow. I wish it was, that you have to allow a customer to take their information from one bank to another, and that bank must accept it. Here's where we are. The KYC data is a responsibility of the bank. So if Mr. Jackson goes to a particular bank and carries his data there, that bank has the right to say, I don't believe in that data. I want fresh data. I want to know for sure that what you're saying to me is accurate. Because if I get caught with anti-money laundering and my correspondent banking relationship is severed, I and I alone, the DTI, has the responsibility. So it is not good enough that you can take your KYC from one bank to another. The other bank also has to be in a position to rely on it. And here is where a national identification system would help us a lot. And when that does come into place, it makes it easier to have portability. Nonetheless, we are working on that issue, and I hope to be here one day when you can acknowledge that that portability actually exists.
Boy, I wish I had the confidence, Governor, that once we have that national ID, that the banks will make it any better. And I tell you, because even when you're banking with a particular bank and you want to open an additional account,
same person,
the same individual, you have to still furnish the same information that they asked for the previous bank account. You know, and one of the things is that, and I think just as regulators, just as a government, we have to find a way in dealing with that portability, because competition in the market, without competition, fees will continue to rise. Once you have a captured set of customers, there's no need, because they know that it is so hard. It takes one customer at least 3 to 6 months to open a bank account. It took my daughter 7 months to open a bank account. 7 months.
So
and that should not be, you know, yeah, but I'm saying if I want to open an additional account at the bank, I have to furnish the same information at the same bank. And I think it's incumbent on us, just as regulators, as lawmakers, that we drive the competition to make it much easier for someone to move from one bank to another. That's the only thing that is going to keep down fees and give us a better service. Competition.
If I may, just before you, you have Governor, when you give me that response about what is each bank, there are a certain set of requirements that the Bank of Jamaica impose on all commercial banks in keeping with their license. And when I go to my bank, I know one of them, I said, is BOJ requirement. And so they required of me So I can't negotiate with them because there's a BOJ stipulation. And all I'm simply saying, Governor, there must be, and I will tell you what must make up this menu of things. From the BO central government, central bank standpoint and commercial bank, arrive at that set of things that makes for the minimum requirement. If a customer want to go in another realm of banking and it need a certain other level of information or what against money laundering and all of that, fine. But there must be some minimum acceptable standard across the banks as you routinely impose in a number of different areas that all banks must adhere to. Because you are the regulator. That Bank of Jamaica Act stipulate what they must do to satisfy you to keep their license. They don't have any discretion. You impose the condition. And it seems like the imposition of any condition is being selectively administered. That is the problem I'm having. And where you have cases, you tell me, for example, about the FYC policy contemplation. The Minister of Finance, former Minister of Finance in this House, February 13, 2018, tell it was coming. 4 years later, nothing has happened. And while nothing has happened, the depositors have to continue to pay those fees. Why is it that anytime any law to be changed to benefit the banking system, it rushes through the parliament and it is done? BOJ table all kind of regulation from time to time because there's an exigency. But anytime anything to benefit the ordinary depositors out there, it creeps through the pipeline and it will get done. We're working on it. We're considering this for years. And anything to benefit the banks, it rushes through the parliament. Why the unequal treatment? Aren't the people of the depositors as important too?
If I can say
after this.
once again, let me be clear. If I am taking you on as a customer, I, the bank, have the sole responsibility to get from you the data that I consider to be appropriate because it is my correspondent banking relationship that is at risk. BOJ can't tell them what to take and what not to take because in the event they take somebody on that turns out to be a terrorist risk or a money laundering risk, BOJ is not indemnifying them. So the point, member, is that the bank is responsible for the KYC data of the customer they are recruiting. They set the standard, and it is they and they alone that have responsibility for it. What we're trying to do, and it will take us a little while, is to do exactly what you want, which is to set up a depository of this data that all the banks agree can be portable. And crucial in that is a national identification program. Whether you know it or not, member, just the matter of identifying the person who is in front of them is a major item for these institutions. They want to know that standing in front of them is John Doe, not somebody else. And for that, they need positive identification. That's why they're asking you for driver's license, and then they want to know where you live and so forth. And national identification that has some kind of technological certainty about who is who would help considerably.
Governor, I'm not going to allow Fitzjackson to continue because there's no time to go. I would like to reiterate that point because that is the major problem that most Jamaican citizens have in doing banking transactions. It takes us a long time to join the bank, and even in moving from one bank to the other, if we could just present our NIDS ID when we step in, just like our passport, which is internationally accepted because it is verified at a particular standard. We, with a NIDS ID verified at a particular standard, would now be able to use that one form of ID and move from bank to bank wherever we feel and be able to do our banking transactions at that minimum level. And that is captured now in our current legislation. So let's move to see that happening in the benefit of the people.
All right. I think we are now at the end of this meeting. But just on the last note, though, Governor and Dr. Henry and Ms. Morris, the issue of inflation, and I think a wider discussion has to be had on it, because I think the issue of prices now is more an effect of what is happening with our trading partners, and not really that much with how our distributors and wholesalers move their prices, just as it would be in the past. And it's a double-edged sword, because you're trying to contain prices here, but it is affected by what the trade or trading. So while trying to contain it here, and the effect of prices overseas with manufacturers, then containing inflation, which has a negative and a positive effect, how do we tweak it to deal with the small man, as Member Holness mentioned? Because I don't think there's any government that will be able to continue the subsidy as the Ministry of Finance has been doing in helping those that are less fortunate. I mean, the budget can only manage so much and no more. So even though while we're growing, the economy is looking good, we are receiving more revenues from the things that are negative towards in the economy, the higher prices, so more GCT, higher prices at the pump, more ad valorem tax. There has to be a balancing out, especially for the less fortunate in the society. So I'm just saying that a wider conversation has to be proposing, and maybe one day we can have you back to have that conversation.
Would be happy to.
May I add to something the chairman said before you close out? I would love for you to continue to use your good office. Sometimes for those of us who are in the political arena, persons hear the information from us in one way, but if the BOJ continuously explain to Jamaicans, Statin explain to Jamaicans how we compare vis-a-vis other countries, how well we are doing, despite whatever pinch we have to suffer because the world has gone through COVID, because the world is probably having the same impact from the war in Ukraine, we as a people of Jamaica can be proud in what we are able to achieve, and we are doing the best despite the struggles. And I think we need some additional voices out there to reiterate this message.
Yeah, and communication is important to us. We're happy to assist. And to say it here, one of the main ways in which we are seeking to hold a lid down on inflation is through that foreign exchange rate, because that drives not just the price of the good, but expectations, yes. Yeah, and so we have worked very hard on that, certainly over the last 5 or 6 months, and I've been having some success with it.
All right. Any final questions? No?
Yeah, one final one. Governor.
A short one, Member
Governor,
Jackson.
if commercial banks are allowed to operate, customers to operate foreign currency accounts, right? And checking accounts too. No.
As a business, yes, but
as a business, yeah, they can without any prohibition from the BOJ.
No, you can have a savings account
in US.
In US,
and you can have a US checking account.
You can have, you can move money around. Wayne?
In the commercial banks, individuals can have a US checking, US savings account. At the same time, the same individual can have Jamaican saving, Jamaican checking. So you can operate all.
No, man, I was only seeking I'm aware of that. The leading question.
I don't think you can have a US checking account with a Jamaican bank. No.
You said again?
I don't think you can have a US checking account with a Jamaican bank.
One bank told me that you I can open.
No, you can have a savings account.
And a
You
check,
can have investment account, but I don't think you can have a checking account.
would the BOJ prohibit such a bank from operating a U.S. checking account?
That's
No,
something
because
I'd have
one
to
bank
take.
told me that.
I would have to take advice on that. I don't know what the pros are.
But I want to lead to another question. You can transfer funds across different Jamaican dollar accounts. But I am told by the banks, if you're transferring, if member Oldness wants to transfer $1 million US to member Sibley's, right? And both of them operate US dollar account, it has to be an international transfer. It can't. Why?
That just has to do with the international settlement system called SWIFT, where every bank in Jamaica, if it wants to move US dollars, has to take it to their correspondent bank in the States and bring it back.
So you're regulated because of regulation. The Bank of Jamaica could not permit that if Bank A and Bank B wanted to
So long as we want to be part of international settlement system, you have to work through your correspondent bank.
Even though the transfer is within one jurisdiction.
Yeah. Member, all right. We have to this meeting to end. Let me thank the Ministry of Finance. Members. Let me thank the Ministry of Finance, the BOJ and the PIOJ, and the large delegation from the PIOJ in coming here this morning. And I think there are some, I hope the BOJ will answer the questions that Member Jackson, so that next time around when we have the governor, it is much more friendly fire.
Chairman, in addition to that, the questions from Member Jackson would have gone to the BOJ through the Parliament. If you haven't received officially, either via email or whatever means, those questions within the next 2 weeks, please let us know. So we know there is a challenge, because it would be in the institution, but just would not have gotten to your desk.
All right. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the week. Members.
Prices rising. Customers are screaming, wondering how they can stretch their dollar. Can their central banks improve their buying power? Your central bank weighs in on the next Caribbean Economic Forum entitled, How Can Central Banks Fight Inflation? Our guests from Barbados, Mr. Clavison Haynes, Governor of the Central Bank of Barbados. From Jamaica, Mr. Richard Biles, Governor of the Bank of Jamaica, and Caribbean economist and economic advisor, Ms. Marla Ducoran. I'm your host, Tony Thorne. Join the Caribbean Economic Forum on Thursday, May the 5th at 8 p.m. Barbados time, 7 p.m. Jamaica time to learn how we can deal with inflation. Don't miss it.
Keep we island clean, so clean. From the streets to the beach, so clean. No dirty up Jamaica, please don't do it.
No dash, no paper, no dash, no plastic. Dispose your garbage responsibly. No know how to recycle, learn it quick. And if you drop it, better pick up every piece of it.
No dirty up Jamaica, no dirty up Jamaica, no dirty up Jamaica, no dirty up Jamaica.
Join BBC Jamaica for A Different Life, a window